Skama wasn't good enough to use Impenetrable Fortress, so she chose to just use Fortress instead to hold the shield with her tomahawk. The shield bearer cleverly deflected the tomahawk with its shield, intending to break Skama's stance. This was a difficult maneuver that made Skama feel as though her axe was being sucked onto its shield. Skama gave up resisting its force, rolled to the side, and used the counteracting force of that action to stand back up. The ethereal axe swung from top to bottom, but was deflected by the wave-bladed sword. At the same time, the undead charged towards Skama. She did not even have the time to breathe. Forced to take the defensive again, Skama deflected attacks with her tomahawk and charged into her opponent. If her opponent was this big, sometimes it would be better to charge through it, rather than standing still. Sunlight. As if to push her forwards in her decision, a blinding flash of light was emitted from behind her. This was a third-tier divine spell. That brilliant light not only blinded the enemy, but also dealt damage to the undead. Although there was a spell of the same tier called Holy Light that would have dealt full damage to evil creatures, it wouldn't have blinded them. Sunlight was probably chosen to support her rather than going for pure damage. The flying caster sent out 3 bolts of light towards the undead with magic arrow. Though she was receiving support, the shield still blocked everything like it was a wall, and left no openings for her to exploit. Skama hacked at it with her tomahawk, but it was easily deflected. Damn it. Its movements are too clean. It wasn't this strong when it used its sword, its proficiency with its shield is too high. So its primary feature is its defenses. But what about that heavy strike? No, impossible. Terrified by her own revelation, Skama slowly backed off. Needless to say, this was so that the casters on the wall could have a clear shot at it. She couldn't move too far away lest it ignores her and runs into the city. That was a scenario that must be avoided at all costs. Given how fast that thing ran, neither Skama nor the others would be able to catch up to it if that happened. If that happened, the defenseless city would see an enormous number of casualties. It was better to veer on the safe side. The rogue on Skama's team was waiting at the sideline, rather than helping out with the fight specifically to catch up to the monster, should it choose to run into the city. That was the plan to stop an opponent from leaving, but its physical abilities made failure quite likely. She slowly kited it while paying attention to its every move. It did not appear to have noticed and followed at a distance. Just as they were about to bring it into the line of fire, wails could be heard from above them. No? The other one is coming at us. The people up there are attacking it. The implications of those words slowly sunk into her head. Checkmate, Skama thought. If the dual wielder was on the same level as the shield bearer, there would be no way Skama and the rest could handle both of them at the same time. No, perhaps they would be dead the moment they came into contact with the enemy. Skama, what do we do? Let's take care of this guy first. Skama spoke with determination after her companion's panicked voice calmed her down somewhat. If they couldn't even take this thing down, they wouldn't even have a chance at an escape. They could only hope that this thing's health had already been whittled down to a wick's length by those spell attacks. After she stopped retreating, Skama turned to face the shield bearer and darted towards it. Her tomahawk was easily blocked by the shield, and so was the ethereal copy. Skama's attacks were not enough to break down the shield bearer's defenses. She had expected her attack to be thwarted, that was all she had to do. The real attack was the magic arrow and shockwave that followed. The spell attacks were followed up by the rogue, who tossed a bottle towards the sides of the undead's leg. The liquid that oozed out of her comrade's shattered bottle was common glue that any alchemist of the like could manufacture. This was a strategy that could only work if the enemy was standing on polished stone. No matter how high of a defense the shield bearer might have, its ability to dodge didn't matter against a bottle thrown at it. The undead was bound to the ground by glue. Even if it only was for a brief moment, their opponent was immobilized. This was a common tactic they used when engaging a foe who was much more powerful than them. Skama circled around to the shield bearer's hand that did not hold the shield, the hand that held the wave-bladed sword, and began attacking. The shield bearer swung its greatsword around, expertly parrying every hit that came its way. Even though its 2 legs were completely stuck on the ground and she had used martial arts to chain her attacks, Skama couldn't land a single hit. This thing is like a metal wall. Skama saw from the corner of her vision the scene of the undead using brute strength to tear its foot away from the stone-tiled ground. 2 more offensive spells were cast, yet they still failed to bring it down. An undying ability. Or something that could heal it over time. There were monsters like hydras or trolls who had the ability to regenerate. For those, you couldn't just deal incremental damage, but would have to land a single fatal hit that could reduce the monster's health to 0. It was futile to continue on their panicked attacks. Skama couldn't even land a single hit on it. Gods damn it. Incoming. Skama couldn't help but shift her gaze upon hearing the rogue's cry. Standing at the gate was the silhouette of the other undead being. The dual wielder. Skama felt her stomach churning, the combined pressure of them all made her want to puke. Is this where I'll die? The rogue who had been executing combos with Skama couldn't handle the pressure and retreated to her side. The dual wielder responded in kind and moved to the shield bearer's side. They're not attacking. Which means, shit. These things are highly sapient. Skama felt as though she could perceive a smile on the dual wielder's rotten face. The shield bearer had shown them attacks that were not on the same level as its defense capabilities, but perhaps that was just to instill despair in them to bide time for the dual wielder to come. Both enemies were there. This was a good opportunity to use AoE spell attacks. Yet, those spells were never cast. No, it might have been better to say that they could not start casting. The reason why should have been obvious. Though attack spells had been proven to be effective, it would also provoke them to initiate their attacks. Their fate would have been set in stone then. Even if their side held off on attacking, their enemy would do so sooner or later. But they simply could not build up the courage to hold their fates in their own hands. After she agonized over this, Skama made her decision. You two, run away. She knocked on the rogue's waist. We'll buy you some time. Ha. For real, me too. Wait, you want me to do that? The rogue wailed, but Skama ignored him. There were two opponents. If they did not at last have two people to hold them off, they could only, a boom rung in their ears. Ha. The undead in front of them, the shield bearer's head had been pierced by what looked like a long needle. Wait, no. What pierced through the shield bearer's head was not a needle. The thing that penetrated through his skull and was now embedded into the stone tile below was something about the size of an index finger. That meant that the thing was so fast that Skama's kinetic vision could not see it flying through the air at all, but could only pick up its afterimage, which looked like a needle. The shield bearer shook, its feet trembled as they stomped on the tiles below, barely allowing it to stand up. Perhaps it was only because it was undead that it could remain standing even after its head had been pierced. Skama and the others could not help but shift their vision away from the enemy in front of them, and look towards where that attack originated from. The undead did not attempt to attack them during this time, as they were also looking towards the same direction. Another attack pierced the shield bearer's head again, and with that, the giant frame of the shield bearer crumbled. It only took 2 shots. No, perhaps it was because it had already taken so many spell attacks and was already weakened. But who could accomplish such a thing? The silhouette of a man could be seen in the air. Well, what? Whose voice was that? Was it Skama's own voice or was it her companion's? She was so shocked that she could no longer tell such a simple thing. In front of them was an armored giant. An approximately 3 meters tall being clad in an odd blood-red armor flew in the air. In his hands was a pipe-shaped object which he held like a crossbow. Perhaps that was what those index finger-sized things came out of. Because it had attacked the shield bearer, they could conclude that it was not their enemy, even if it wasn't their ally either. Skama and the others slowly moved away from the dual wielder. If they were to be caught up in their battle, she knew for sure that they would meet their ends right there. Perhaps the dual wielder had already lost interest in Skama's group, or perhaps it was because the armored giant in the air was the only threat worthy of its attention. Whatever the reason was, it did not attempt to halt their retreat. And then, the battle began. It was the dual wielder's turn. It threw one of its swords. It threw the sword with such strength that there was no way that Skama could avoid it. If she tried to block it, it would still inflict a fatal amount of damage. The armor did not try to avoid it, but tanked the hit with its own body. Perhaps it could not avoid it, or maybe it did not feel the need to avoid the attack at all. The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing against metal rang as the thrown sword bounced off the armor. It then disappeared as if it had evaporated into the air, only to show up back in the dual wielder's hands. It did not return to his hand. Rather, another one had appeared. The armor in the air pointed the pipe at the dual wielder in one smooth motion, as though that sword toss did not do damage to him at all. The pipe found its target, and then, it spat out something after a brief flash of fire and lightning. What used to be single-shot attacks turned into an uncountable number of projectiles. Percatatata, the sound of apathetic violence could be heard everywhere. Faced with the unknown projectiles, the dual wielder swung his swords. The sharp-ting sounds of whatever was flying towards it being sliced into pieces could be heard. But there was a limit to it. 2 swords could not have dealt with the dozens or even hundreds of projectiles. The tiny projectiles flew at shocking speeds as it penetrated the enemy. The dual wielder started twitching as though it had muscle spasms, and like the shield bearer before it, it disappeared. The 2 undead beings had vanished in a blink of an eye. Skama was truly, from the bottom of her heart, speechless. To be honest, she had no idea what had just happened. But Skama understood one thing, that armor was mind-bogglingly strong, stronger than everyone she knew. She could not stop blinking. Nothing about this felt real. It was hard for her to accept that they had been saved. Their despair and readiness for self-sacrifice were shattered so easily, her mind could not keep up at all. Well, what the hell is that? Hey, isn't it a plate from the Adventurers Guild? Ha. She squinted her eyes to focus on the details, after the rogue had said that, and saw that on the neck of the armor, though she could barely make out its shape, was a necklace that held a metal plate. Though it was about the same size as Skama's, it looked minuscule on that giant figure. As expected of a rogue to notice something that she would have missed. The metal plate on the necklace was of a color that she did not recognize. She had seen the color of orichalcum before, so by the process of elimination this was an adamantite-ranked adventurer. There were 3 adamantite-ranked groups in the kingdom, and the color of the armor made her realize which team it was a part of. Perhaps this is someone from Red Drop. Upon hearing Lillinette's question, Skama replied, should be. If this were someone from Blue Rose or Darkness, she would be ranting about why they would choose this hue for their armor. The floating armor turned its back to Skama. Well, wait. The armor responded to her voice and turned around slowly. It raised up its left hand, straightened its index and middle finger, and pointed them towards its forehead. As if it was bidding farewell, the armor gestured at them gently. Then, it just flew away. Skama stared vacantly at the empty sky and asked the rogue. What was that? Who knows? She could not understand it all, but someone from Red Drop came over to assist them, that was probably it. But, I understood one thing. If we have someone this strong, perhaps the Sorceress Kingdom's invasion will come to an end right here. Of course, this is under the pretext that it would still be willing to break the adventurer's code, and will continue participating in battles from this point onwards.